Atul Hatwal, to you first. Has migrant become a dirty word?
I think, unfortunately, it has. The nature of our debate with inflammatory language, statistics which bear no resemblance to reality, and the use of immigration as a sort of political football has led the term migrant to be a dirty word, and frankly, it's debased within our debate, and it reflects enormously badly on our political culture that we've got to this pass.
Douglas, is the use of the word migrant, is concern over migration, is it racism in another form?
No, of course it's not, and we should long ago have got over the idea that it is, because it's simply been that word you've just used, racist, is used to shut down debate, to terrify people away from a discussion which we should have had a very long time ago and which we've really, I think, avoided and ducked. As for whether or not the term migrant is a pejorative term, as it were, at the moment, I can't see how it is. Most people in Britain regard the opportunity to migrate around as being, good. The point is, however, in certain circumstances, and one of the problems we keep confronting in this is the elision, particularly by those who are in favour of mass immigration, the elision, for instance, between legal and illegal immigration, legal and illegal migration. There is all the difference in the world between people going to a country, going through the correct processes, and then living in that country, and those breaking into the country and breaking the law of that country by doing so. There is also one other quick point. All the difference in the world between people going to a country like Britain and asking for entry because they are fleeing some war zone or some human rights abuse, people fleeing from Syria. There is all the difference in the world between people in that situation and economic migrants who often have a very, substantial and important case, but it's a different thing. And my point is, all of these things are to a great extent being bundled together by people who don't mind the fact that they're bundling it together because their case is for mass immigration as a whole.
Is that a fair point, Atul, that we are looking at the debate with very broad brushstrokes, and actually a lot of the population don't understand the difference between legal and illegal? They don't understand which is having the impact on their lives as they perceive it to be?
I'd agree with Douglas's point, but not his conclusion. His point is right, that migration actually is many different individual debates, whether it's legal, whether it's economic. I mean, for example, at the moment in this country, we have the best part of 1 million vacancies unfilled. Businesses are crying out for skills, and migration is required to keep our economy and keep our recovery on track. And then there are the issues around illegal migration. And and Douglas is right about that, where I disagree with him is that it is a point of convenience for people who would be seen to be on the positive side of the argument, the progressive side of the argument, like myself. I would dearly love the argument, the discussion, to focus on the facts, and the facts are very different for different categories of immigration.
May I just very quickly? First of all, of course, you wait to the argument the minute you use the term progressive as something on the side of mass immigration. It may be that mass immigration is not what you term a progressive thing. It may be a regressive thing. That's just bundling things up in a language that suits your argument. But if I may just go back to the more important point you just raised, which is this issue of the skills shortage. When you mention a million vacancies in this country, that is not far away as a figure from the number of people in this country who are out of work. Your conclusion to that, if I may just finish this point, and then you come back. If I may finish this point, the point is that your conclusion is, if there are 1 million vacancies in this country, we must go round the world and hoover up who we can to come to this country and take those jobs. My conclusion to it would be, and I think this government's conclusion to it would be, it may be preferable to train up people in this country to make sure that there are people in this country already of all sorts of backgrounds who are trained and educated to do those jobs.
Atul?
Douglas, that's living in economic la-la land. The two aren't actually mutually exclusive. In the very short term, we have a real problem with skills. Hundreds of billions of pounds of contracts for businesses that employ British workers are under threat, according to a study by KPMG a couple of months ago, because of skills gaps, because there are not enough skilled workers to fill the roles. If they don't get those workers in the next 3 to 9 months, then the contracts will fall and British jobs are at risk. That's the short-term problem. The medium to long-term challenge is to ensure that our workforce is educated, that we have the right skills. That is absolutely essential, but that is in no way negates the short-term challenge we face. And frankly, I think it's a bit rich to condemn British businesses, British workers to job insecurity and collapsing employment, which would happen if we don't have the skills required to plug the gaps, just on the sake of an ideological principle that you seem to be espousing.
If I may say so, I mean, the ideological thing is all on your side, because the point is you are looking at certain big businesses in this country undoubtedly look at migration solely as an economic issue. They say, for instance, there's a skills shortage we must immediately plug. We've heard this sort of argument for many years. A skills shortage we must immediately plug, and that's a short-term ambition. The problem, of course, is that cannot look at the long-term issues that this raises. When you bring people to Britain from all sorts of places around the world, and let's not kid ourselves, of the people coming to this country, they are not all coming to fill this skills shortage. A lot of people are coming for all sorts of other reasons, including incredibly low-skilled jobs that British workers should be able to perform. But if you take this view that big business, and you do, that certain parts of big business, and you do, that, as it were, migration is a short-term thing, we need workforce now, we'll go anywhere in the world, you do two things. First of all, you embed that ability to think that all of these business demands can be answered by going around the world. In other words, you put off the pressure on education and other things. If I may just finish my point, and you put off that debate for another day. And secondly, you make another terrible mistake, because migration is not simply about plugging an economic gap or helping a firm through the next quarter. Migration is also about the identity of a country, the sense of belonging and the sense of home that people have the right to have. And that is massively altered, at the very least, in the long term, by this short-term demand.
Douglas, let Atul get in now.
Douglas, yours is a very, very privileged point. The reality out there is that people are struggling to make ends meet. If their jobs are placed under threat, which is what businesses say will happen if they cannot plug those skills gaps, then we will suffer an enormous economic impact. And your point about
Atul, sorry, just what to the point that Douglas makes, that there is you're saying there's a skills gap. Douglas is pointing out that there are people here in the UK unemployed who could do those jobs.
Well, the issue is about training. The OECD completed a survey last year. We, as a country, were 23rd out of 24 in terms of literacy, 24th out of 24 in terms of numeracy. Now, we have a tremendous challenge in terms of skills at the lower end of our labour market and indeed at the top end. But that is the work of years. And it is not simply the case that that's up to business to fill. That is government's role. And there has been a failing by governments of all stripes over the past decades. It is totally fallacious. It is totally fallacious to say that governments do not care. This is a prime election issue. It's a prime political issue. The two can go hand in hand. We can have better training. We can have better skills. We can upskill our workforce, but not at the cost of today's workers, today's businesses, and today's recovery.
But we all know that of the increase in migration that's occurring, this is not tech billionaires from India coming to UK. It is not high-skilled, high-end workers alone. A lot of the migration, particularly obviously from outside the EU, and a lot of it from within the EU, is low-skilled work. It is a scare tactic of the mass immigration lobby to say that it is otherwise. It is a lot of people, understandably wanting to improve their lot and so on, but coming to this country to do low-skilled jobs. Now, I understand.
You're factually incorrect about.
Douglas, let Atul get back in there.
Douglas, you're factually incorrect about immigration from outside the EU when you say it's low skill. Actually, half, the biggest proportion, are international students who bring billions into into our economy. Just earlier this week, PwC released a report that in London alone, international students bring 2.3 billion net benefit. So, yes, there are I would say, from the European Union, some low-skilled migrants coming, but I speak to employers every week, and their view is if they could possibly employ a Brit, they would. But actually, it's tough because too many of our workforce lack those basic soft skills required, and that is the challenge that needs to be met.
Douglas, there is a sense that you're slightly paddling upstream here, aren't there? You look at what's happening in the world. You look at what's happening with people from Myanmar travelling to Thailand and Malaysia. the world's population is very, very mobile. Migration is not going to stop, is it? You can't surely be arguing that, that we could stop it or that we shouldn't have it here in the UK.
Of course I'm not arguing that we should stop it. I'm arguing against the mass immigration argument that has done a massive amount of damage in recent years to, apart from anything else, the social mobility and the social cohesion of our country. And I think that it has been misrepresented for a very long time, and it ought to be talked about more frankly. There is only, in a recent poll, only 7% of the British people said they wanted more migration into the UK. 7%. This is a minority belief, a deeply minority belief. My belief is the one that is held by the majority of the British people, which is that we need a properly structured migration process which doesn't lose 1 million people in the country who are illegal immigrants, that doesn't fail to work out what type of workforce we need and then work from there. And
Douglas, you're guilty.
Please let me finish one more point. The Conservative Party said that when they were in government, they would bring down migration from the hundreds of thousands a year to the tens of thousands. Of course, they failed in that target. But failing in targets like that when people are wanting them also causes a democratic problem. It is the overwhelming majority view of the British public that they want migration to come down, and come down substantially. So the mass immigration lobby is itself actually the one that is having to row upstream against the tide of overwhelming public opinion.
OK, Douglas, finally, Atul, last word to you. We've only got 30 seconds.
Sorry, Douglas, 2 points. In what you were just saying, you were aligning illegal and legal migration, which was the problem you raised earlier, actually, which confuses the debate.
No.
And then in terms of net migration, this government, no one can doubt this government has tried to be tough, but immigration is rising because our economy is expanding, and they have made a rational choice. Jobs, security, economic growth. That's what matters. We had an election a couple of weeks ago. The voters made their views clear. We had